Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to get on with this series we've been doing with the book Blood of the Wolf. Remember that if you want to hear more of what I'm doing here, hear more stories, read out loud, please do subscribe, hit the notifications bell, like this video, chain up your friends, make them listen. Handcuffs have a double meaning, you know. Read a book together. Who knows what'll happen? Okay, not that kind of channel, but anyways, make sure that, hey, if you're feeling generous, check out the description down below and also the banner, channel banner up at top. Both got links going to my author page, my Etsy, eBay, Redbubble. That's how I support my daughter and support my writing. So if you do like what you're hearing and you do want to see it continue, then please. Also, we will be bringing other authors on eventually as this channel grows so that they can promote their works and give you other pretty faces to look at than my amazing image. Remember, Blood of the Wolf, you can find it on Amazon, paperback edition, and in Kindle. You can also find it on barnesandnoble.com. So, let's get into this. Chapter 8, Spring Cleaning. In the weeks that followed, no one heard anything involving the triads, aside from a story about the warehouse fire on the news talking about strange burn patterns at the focal point of the blaze and many unexplained dead bodies inside. So far, there was no sign of retaliation, though, but Michael and Arthur knew it was inevitable and only a matter of time. Arthur told Michael many times that he shouldn't have let Megan live, because she could lead them right to them. Michael kept reiterating to him, though, that she had purpose. If an attack was coming, though he wanted to know about it long before it occurred. He put Socrates to work on an advanced computer system called Skywolf. It was not only the most advanced computer that any of them had ever seen, but to top it off, it was independently intelligent. By reaching out to the spirit world, he asked one of his spirit wolf guardians to join with the computer. Technology in life is all just energy, so the two joined together perfectly. He didn't stop there, though. He had Socrates build an advanced network of satellites, each one no bigger than a car battery, but more advanced than anything on Earth. Michael had him make 50 of them and put them in a container in the backyard that could be used as a deployment device when it got dark. Once the sun went down, he took the container as high into the atmosphere as he could, to a point where he almost couldn't breathe, and then pressed a button on the container to activate the satellites inside. As he did, all the satellites launched up out of the container and into space to their set coordinates around the globe, creating a spy network Michael could use to keep an eye on world events and those in his own backyard. With the spy network up and running, he could now see firsthand how bad things were getting. He knew that things were bad, but now having a bird's eye view along with the feeling of pure hopelessness he was physically feeling from the world around him, it brought everything into perspective. He knew he needed a more secure base of operations, and a place where he knew his loved ones would be safe. So he had Skywolf set him up an untraceable bank account with a large amount of money that would never deplete no matter how much he spent. He did this by connecting it to the bank accounts of all the known drug lords, crime lords, and corrupt dictators from around the world that Skywolf could find in U.S. databases. He figured it was money they would never know was missing because the withdrawals would never go on record and never come from just one account. Even if they did find out, he almost dared them to come after him. Everyone was watching him do this, and stood in awe as he put all of it together like some sleeper spy they had been living with for years. He had almost forgotten about school until Angela brought it up. He didn't even realize he had already missed a week of schooling. He had been so caught up in everything he was doing that the time just flew by. Alan and Lisa had been right there with him, and it hadn't really dawned on them either. Lisa's parents were still reeling from the loss of their daughter, that they hadn't noticed she was with Michael every day and not in school. Michael knew he only had a month left before he graduated, so he agreed to follow through to keep up the appearance of a normal high school senior. Time seemed to crawl by while Michael was in school. He knew there was so much he still had to do to prepare for what was to come. Everyone looked at him differently, and it Wasn't surprising since he now had all the power of a god, and the aura that seemed to radiate around him showed it. Though most couldn't see the energy that was beaming off of him, people still stared constantly. It actually made him a little uncomfortable at times, but he kept up appearances until it was time to graduate. He even managed to make it out without any further confrontations with the Asian gangs, something he thought would have been inevitable. The weekend after they graduated was one for celebration, but Michael went right back to work on getting everything in order so he could start cleaning up what he was now calling his territory. Lisa could barely pry him away at times just to be alone and take his mind off of things, although she was right there along with him, fascinated by everything he was doing. She knew she had nothing to worry about, especially when he told her that he was going to be starting a pack soon and he'd be the alpha, which was the way of his people. He told her she would be the alpha female in his pack, and that no woman came before her, except his mom. She would always hold an alpha role to him, but no other. Michael started researching warehouse facilities and old abandoned buildings deemed necessary for demolition. He found one such building down on the water near the St. John's Bridge, in Portland's industrial area. It looked like crap, but he knew with Thunderwolf technology it would be a virtual fortress when he was through, and looked like a palace on the inside. Some place they could call home and always feel safe. The city didn't want to sell, but with a little charm and hypnotic suggestion, Michael made them come around. It took a couple months for Michael and the techs to do the repairs and upgrades needed, but when it was finished, it was quite literally out of this world. The first 2 floors were reserved for living space and were made to look like a mansion. The 3rd floor was made into a research and technology facility and had no parallel. The 2 basement levels were turned into an underground medical and holding facility, just in case he needed to detain anyone. He wanted to plan for all possible scenarios. After all the upgrades were made, he knew he would need guards to patrol the facility, and ones that he knew would be loyal to him. He went out and bought 2 wolves from local dealers, a male and a female. Then he used a procedure that his people had designed to enhance other races with their own abilities in order to make them faster, stronger, and more resilient. This process involved taking a sample of his own DNA and creating a gene serum that he injected to each of the wolves. The process changed them on the genetic level, increasing their size and slightly augmenting their appearance, giving them an almost smoky fog that surrounded them. It was a mutation of Michael's shadow teleport ability that made the wolves almost shadowy in appearance. Their senses weren't altered because Thunderwolf's senses were no different than wolf senses anyway. Michael also trained them using his primal connection to them and his telepathic ability to teach them to hide within the shadows as well as teleport through them. He had created a breed slightly larger than the extinct direwolf and far more ferocious than any predator on the planet. Once they were trained, he took them out on the streets at night to hunt criminals with him. They became almost legendary monsters to the criminal community, which Michael got a serious kick out of every time he would hear a story on the news. The vicious demon wolves that prowled the streets of Portland. The fallout of that being that common citizens were also now afraid of being attacked by one of them. Michael knew this would never happen, but it was something he would have to address sooner or later. For now, he had to address a question that was posed to him by Arthur and Alan. They had asked what the effects of the gene serum would be on them, seeing what it had done to the wolves. Everyone had moved into the new building by this point, and were adjusting rather nicely to their lavish surroundings. Angela had begun to become more comfortable with everything, although there were still a few things that would catch her off guard at times, as well as the others. However, they began to expect the changes as they occurred. So when Michael began experimenting with the wolves, it really didn't shock them much, and actually started many discussions about the effects of the serum on humans. Especially Arthur and Alan, who cornered him one evening while he was working in the upstairs tech lab. Arthur was the first to speak up. So now that you've made your super scary watchdogs, what's next on your agenda? Michael looked at him and laughed a little. Why do you ask? Well, Alan and I have been talking, and we both have noticed that you seem to have some major plans in the works, and we want in. Michael nodded his head as he thought about the request. Well, you're right. There are definitely plans in the works, but nothing like the small-time stuff we did a few months back. Things need to change. Preparations need to be made, and battle lines need to be drawn. Alan got excited. So where do we sign up? Michael sighed. I'm pretty sure Arthur can handle what's coming, at least in the short term, but you can't heal like we do. I can cover you in armor and teach you to use some pretty advanced weaponry, but that still doesn't guarantee you're not going to get hurt. Alan looked disappointed. Look, Mike, I've seen what you've done with the wolves, and it's had me wondering what that serum of yours would do to me. Ever since you've gained all these abilities, I've kind of started to feel left out and not as needed like before. You're my brother, and I want to be there to help you with whatever it is you're doing. Plus, I still need to pay you back for saving my life that night outside the concert. Arthur stepped forward. I want to try out that serum too. Oh yeah, and what do you mean I can handle things in the short term? What the hell do you got planned? Michael nodded his head as he thought over his next words carefully. This decision is yours to make, but it comes at a heavy price and a warning. Alan and Arthur both began to look very nervous. I have had Socrates working on a spirit gate downstairs for just such an occasion. I need to build an army of sorts, my pack here on Earth, a group that can defend the planet when evil tries to claim it again. Both Alan and Arthur became even more uneasy because Michael's tone had gotten very serious, unlike anything they had seen from him before. The wolves are primal and can't be tempted by evil like humans. Therefore, the process is different. Before I inject you with the serum, you must pass through the spirit gate and come out alive on the other side. As you pass through the gate, your spirit will be tempted by the most powerful evils in the universe. And if your soul is found wanting, it will be destroyed, and you will die, so that you may never harm another. Alan and Arthur grew weak in the knees, and they both almost fell down when they heard that. After taking a deep breath, they both gained their composure and made the decision to undergo the spirit trial. Michael smiled as he nodded his head again. Then let us begin. Michael took them down to the bottom level of the complex, where the holding cells were. In a room at the end of a long hallway, he had set up a temple with warding and protection symbols all over the walls, ceilings, and floor. At the far end of the room was the gate. It was covered in runes with a snarling wolf head at the top, staring down in judgment, almost saying, "Just give me a reason, and I'll tear you apart." Michael looked at them both with a very serious and to-the-point expression. Who's first? They both looked at each other, almost waiting for the other to say something. Alan finally spoke up. Rock, paper, scissors? Arthur nodded. After a quick game, Arthur won and decided to go first. Michael put a hand on his back and led him up to the gate as Alan followed, eager to see what would happen. As Arthur stepped through, he instantly grabbed his head, screaming out in terror and mental agony. It made Alan jump, but to Michael's relief, he stepped through to the other side just before passing out. Alan looked at Michael in confusion. What does that mean? Is he dead? No, he made it. If he had failed, he wouldn't be here. His soul, along with his body, would have been vaporized. Alan gulped as Michael looked at him with a grin. Your turn. Alan stepped through with the same result. Michael was sure they would be fine, but he had to test them just like he would have to test anyone else he chose to give the gift of the serum to. He picked them both up and carried them towards the cells, putting each one in a separate enclosure. Socrates appeared carrying 2 vials of the serum. He had been watching the whole time, but stayed in the shadows waiting for the results. Michael injected them both and then closed the cell doors behind them. He looked down at Socrates and raised an eyebrow. Now we just see if they can last the week without giving in to the animal within. Socrates whimpered a bit. I'm pretty sure Alan will make it, but I wonder about Arthur. He already has a temper. Michael nodded. Only time will tell, my friend. Over the next week, Michael kept a close eye on them, bringing them meat and water to keep them nourished and hydrated. They needed a large amount of protein now that their genetic code was being altered. It was the same thing Michael had to endure, but on a much smaller scale. Whereas Michael was kept in a coma, Alan and Arthur woke up only 12 hours after the injection and were allowed to experience the change. The pain of their muscles strengthening and growing, their bone structures becoming stronger and denser, not to mention the part that was almost as difficult as the spirit gate itself, trying to control the animal within. Alan and Arthur both clawed and punched the walls, screaming to be let out and shouting violent threats if their demands weren't met. No matter how hard they tried, though, they couldn't escape. The cells were made of plasteel and plascrete. They were also warded with magic, so they could only be opened by Michael or another full-blood Thunderwolf. When the week was over, Michael opened the cells to find that Alan and Arthur had both made it through. Arthur rubbed his eyes and looked up at Michael as he walked out. How long have I been in there? A week. When Arthur heard that, he became enraged and rushed at Michael. A week? You kept us locked up in there for a week, clawing at the walls and tearing at our skin trying to get out? As he got within reach, Michael thrust his hand out and grabbed Arthur's throat. He lifted him up off the ground with ease as his eyes flared red and he spoke with a commanding growl. Know your place, wolf. I am the patriarch of the Shadow Wolves, and you will respect that. All the fight instantly drained out of Arthur as he tried to look away and not meet Michael's gaze. Michael turned and looked towards Alan, who was cowering a bit as well. He lowered Arthur down and released his grip as the red glow in his eyes dimmed. Arthur hung his head in shame. I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. Michael shook his head. It's the wolf within you. You've never had to deal with it before. It gets easier with time, but you've got me to keep you in line if it becomes a problem. I didn't have anyone to keep me in line. But then again, I guess I always felt the wolf within since I was a full-blood. Michael put his arms around both of them. I'm glad you guys made it through. Now go take a shower. You stink. They both laughed as they walked down the hall and up the stairs to the bathrooms in their rooms. As Michael followed them, Lisa met him at the top of the stairs. So why didn't you offer your gene serum to me? He smiled and gave her a hug. For one very simple reason. The gene serum contains my DNA, and if I injected you with my DNA, any hopes of us having a future together would be lost. You would be like one of my children genetically, and I can't have children with one of my children. Lisa got a foul look on her face as the thought crossed her mind. I guess I never thought about it that way. Michael gave her a kiss on the forehead. Not to worry, though. There will be plenty more adventures for you to be involved in. For now, I need someone that can run things here at home and make sure all the projects are still going strong while I'm out saving the world, which is why I have something that might interest you. Michael took her up to the tech lab, where he had her sit down in a high-tech looking recliner. He strapped her into the chair, which made her look at him very curiously. Your surprise is a kinky new sex chair? Michael smiled. No, but you might think it's a little hot when you try it out. It's a virtual learning apparatus. He handed her a pair of goggles and told her to try them on. When she did, she jumped a little. Wow, it's virtual reality! Michael nodded, even though he knew she couldn't see him. You can choose any learning program in the computer that you want to learn, and it will instantly upload it into your brain. Skills that would take you years to master can be learned in a matter of minutes or hours, depending on the size of the program. Michael put a hand on her shoulder. Just remember to take a rest after each program so you don't fry your brain. Your brain cells can't heal as fast as mine, so you might not want to push it past one per day. She turned her head and looked at him like he was being a smartass. I'm not kidding. The human mind can only take so much before it gets burnt out. You have fun learning whatever you want. I've got to go check on Arthur and Alan so I can start moving plans forward. Lisa nodded and started picking the program she wanted to learn for the day. As Michael was walking down the stairs, he telepathically called out to Arthur and Alan. Meet me in the living room. We have a lot to discuss. Arthur and Alan both jumped when they heard Michael's voice in their heads, especially Arthur, who was still in the shower and just about slipped and fell, and he turned quick because he thought Michael was right behind him. Michael waited for about 15 minutes, talking with his mom before they finally came down. Arthur gave Michael a very frustrated look. So what's so important that you had to interrupt me during a very relaxing shower? Michael laughed. Aw, did I catch you tugging one out? None of your damn business. Angela cringed as she got up to leave the room. I'll leave you guys alone. Michael stood up and got more serious. The reason I called you down here is because now that we are all settled in and have our home base situated, it's time to start cleaning up Portland. Arthur smiled. Well, it's about time. Michael nodded. But first, you both need to be trained. Arthur puffed up his chest and tried to look very confident and tough. What training? I got all the training I need in the military. Michael nodded again. With a thought, he shut off all the lights, teleported behind Arthur, and kicked him across the room. Then he turned the lights back on and stared at him while he picked himself up, favoring his back. You were saying? Arthur snarled a little, but as Michael's eyes started to glow red, he backed down quickly. I only proved my point so abruptly because, though your military training taught you to deal with your average insurgents and street thugs, the demons you saw when you passed through the gate won't be so easily defeated. Arthur nodded his head, understanding that maybe there was a little more left to learn. Over the next month and a half, Michael trained them both in the fighting styles of Thunder Guard and how to shadow teleport like all the members of his house. Alan began showing signs of psychic ability that was only enhanced by Michael's genetics, so he started training him to be a wolf priest. Michael explained that if all went well, Alan would be the head wolf priest of his house here on Earth, and would be putting all new recruits through the spirit trials and the gene serum treatment from now on. Arthur became the leader of his elite guard and in charge of the training of all new recruits, a role he took to with great enthusiasm. As their training concluded, they could fully understand now what it meant to be a Thunderwolf, and part of one of the most elite fighting forces in the universe. Michael allowed them a few days to take a breather before gathering them again for the next phase of his plan. Lisa, Alan, and Arthur were all sitting in the main computer room, waiting for Michael and wondering what his next phase could be. As he walked in, they all turned to face him, eager to know what was coming next. He walked past them and up to the computer, which greeted him as he entered the room. "Good morning, Lord Kerrigan. How can I be of assistance today? Please pull up a map of the Portland metro area." As the map appeared, he turned to everyone. "What do you see?" Lisa looked at him sarcastically and smiled. "Portland." Michael smiled and nodded. "You're right. It is Portland. But it is also our current territory." "Skywolf, display map 2. As the second map popped up, it showed many areas of red filling the map. "Now what do you see?" This time Alan spoke up. "A red map." Michael laughed. "Yes, jackass, it's a red map. But it's what it signifies that is more important. Each red dot signifies a crime that has been committed in the last week." Lisa and Alan's eyes got wide, but Arthur just shrugged. "So tell us something we don't know. We live in a shithole that the police and local governments refuse to do anything about." "It's that way everywhere in the country." Michael nodded. "But here is where it gets interesting." Michael turned back to the computer screen with a smile. "Skywolf, run Kerrigan program ultimatum." The house symbol for the Shadow Wolves appeared on the screen, and an audible message began to play. "We are the Shadow Wolves, guardians of the light and destroyers of evil. We will no longer sit idly by and play witness to the corruption of this state's officials, the crime that runs rampant through its streets, and the victimization of its innocent population. However, we are not without heart. Therefore, we will give the evil of this city 2 days to decide their fate. Leave the state or be punished accordingly. We encourage those that have loved ones involved in any criminal activities to warn them what is coming, if they don't change their ways. We will only warn you once. The good people of Oregon will no longer be victimized." As the message ended, Michael turned back around to see everyone's reaction. Alan and Lisa both looked surprised. Arthur was smiling. "So when and where are we going to play that message?" Michael smiled. "Skywolf, turn on Channel 2 News." As the news station came on, the reporters looked very concerned as they talked about a mysterious message that just interrupted every TV and radio station throughout Oregon and parts of Washington. "We just did play that message. Get ready, because in 2 days, we go to war." Arthur cheered as Alan and Lisa still looked a little surprised, but they trusted Michael and knew that he only had everyone's best interest in mind. As Michael left the room, Angela was standing in the hallways. "Well, you made an impression. The entire state's in a panic, and the Shadow Wolves have now been labeled a terrorist organization." Michael shrugged. "He can't please everybody." Angela gave him a hug. "I just hope you know what you're doing." Over the next 2 days, Michael watched the news as everyone prepared for some terrorist attack. Police were talking tough in interviews, and the National Guard had been put on alert. Michael just shook his head in amusement. Lisa was sitting next to him and saw him smiling as they watched the news. "So the entire state is panicking and you're smiling?" He looked over at her and nodded. "Yes, because this just proves how much is wrong with the world. Evil gets threatened, and instead of cheering, people panic. I understand their panic because they are most likely worried about the collateral damage. Some innocent people may get harmed in the crossfire because they didn't get out of the way, or they ran to the aid of those poor misunderstood parasites that plague this world with their crime, drugs, and terror. However, they will not be harmed by any of my people. if it can be helped. The unfortunate, terrible fact about all of this is that to enact a positive change in the world, you must sometimes be hated before you can be loved and understood. Which is why I had Socrates make us all full body armor, so we won't be recognized. We still need to be able to walk around in public when we're not defending them for their own overabundance of tolerance for the filth that fills the streets and makes them hide in their homes. This will all get worse before it gets better, but I can promise you it will get better. This is what I'm here to do. Reset the balance. Michael turned off the news and put his arm around Lisa. So you going to be okay through all of this? She snuggled in a little closer and nodded her head. I just get worried about what the consequences will be to all of this. I understand there needs to happen, but even with as good as a change like this will be, you know the people will be outraged. The police and the government will be forced to try and hunt you down. Michael hugged her a little tighter. I know, and I expect it. But eventually they will come to see this is how things need to be. The evil that is coming will make what we are doing here now look like a minor bump in the road. When everything comes about, they won't have time to focus on us, and they will come to understand that they need us if they hope to survive. It didn't seem to give her much comfort, but he knew she understood. Just in time to break the silence, Alan came in, trying to figure out how to attach the armor. Michael looked at him for a few seconds, very amused at the trouble he was having, and the look of complete confusion on his face. Lisa pushed on his shoulder. Go help him, he looks clueless. Michael walked over and helped him attach the parts he was having trouble with. After it was on, Alan still looked confused, as did Arthur, who was walking into the room with the armor already on. How are these little scraps of armor supposed to protect us, let alone hide our identity? Michael smiled. Say suit up. As Arthur and Alan said it, they both jumped as the armor formed around them and covered their entire body, including their heads. The armor made them look like metal werewolves, and even added another foot to their height. Michael smiled as Alan and Arthur looked down at the suits in amazement. Lisa walked around them with the same look of awe. You like them? They both nodded. It had left them speechless. Michael went on to explain how they were made from nanotechnology. The suits were, for lack of a better word, alive, and could not only absorb massive amounts of damage, but they could also repair themselves. They came with digital readouts with a link to the Skywolf that could be accessed through voice command, as could the rest of the suit. The nanotechs in the suit filtered all air that entered the suit, so no environment would be too harsh for them to breathe in. While they continued to look at the suits they had on, Michael walked out of the room to grab his own suit. When he walked back in, Alan, Arthur, and Lisa all stood in awe. Michael's suit somehow looked so much more massive than their own. They couldn't tell if it was his sheer presence or the fact that he was just that much larger than the rest of them that made him look so ominous. Michael flexed the suit and checked all the systems to make sure everything was in working order. Then he turned to address them. Helm. As he said this, the wolf helm retracted back into the armor. Arthur and Alan both said the same command, and their wolf helms did the same. Arthur looked at him a little annoyed. Why didn't you tell us we could do that before? Well, I figured after you said the last command, I'd let you figure out the rest. Michael smiled as Arthur grumbled. Now on to the business at hand. Arthur, Alan, and I will be going out tonight. Lisa, you'll stay here to keep us informed of anything the Skywolf spots that we might miss if we get into heavy battle. Everyone nodded. Canis, Lupus, come. As Michael said this, 2 wolves he had genetically enhanced entered the room, drawing their own form of armor. Arthur stopped checking his own armor and weaponry as they entered. What are they supposed to be, werewolves? Michael nodded. Exactly. They all laughed. Alan put a hand on Michael's shoulder. Well, if the sight of us doesn't make everyone shit themselves, then those 2 definitely will. Michael laughed some more. That was my intention. Michael looked around like he might be missing something. Then he nodded as he had remembered. He held out his hand towards the stairwell and stood there for a moment. Everyone stared at him, wondering what he was doing. Arthur walked over and looked at him, then looked at his arm. Stretching? Michael nodded. Something like that. Just then a katana came floating around down the stairs and into Michael's hand. It was covered in runes and glowed with holy energy. I just finished making it yesterday. Arthur nodded and then smiled. So where's mine? Michael smiled. What, you didn't think I'd forget about you? Socrates walked down the hallway, holding some weapons. Here are the weapons you requested for the captain and your priest lord. Michael nodded as he reached out and took them from Socrates. Thank you, my friend. He handed a cudgel to Alan and a pair of clawed gauntlets to Arthur. Both weapons were covered in runes as well. Arthur and Alan smiled as they looked over their new weapons. Michael attached his katana to the back of his armor, which formed a sheath, almost as if it had responded to his thoughts. The sun's gone down, so let's get out there and see what's waiting for us. They left through underground tunnels that had been attached to the old sewer lines that emptied out into the river. As they came out into the open, Lisa came over the radio. There's a large crowd gathered in Pioneer Square, and I think they're waiting for you guys. Looks like you really stirred up the hornet's nest on this one. Skywolf picked up a news report about a large number of heavily armed gang and mafia members filling the square and preparing for a showdown. They have hostages. They're keeping them surrounded in the center of the square, and they're threatening to kill them unless you guys surrender. Michael shook his head. Well, that's not an option. Lisa came over the radio again. Police have cordoned off the area and the National Guard has been called in. You sure you're ready for this much attention? Michael nodded to Alan and Arthur. It's time the world learned that there are forces out there that will no longer tolerate the actions of evil men and women. Warclaw, you hit them from the east. Soulfang, hit them high from the west side of the square. I'll come in from above and protect the hostages. So wait until you see me move. Arthur came over the radio. Who the hell are Warclaw and Soulfang? Michael responded with a bit of a serious tone in his voice. Warclaw is your new name, and Soulfang is you. He said this, pointing to Alan. The Shadow Wolves are a new unit, a new beginning, which means you leave your old lives and call signs in the past. Since we're on the subject, call me by the name my people gave me, Bloodfang. I'm no longer Justice. Arthur looked a little confused. Why'd they call you that? You'll find out soon enough. Bloodfang pointed out the werewolves. You two do what you do best. The two wolves snarled and took off towards downtown, as Bloodfang took to the air, while Soulfang and Warclaw began to teleport towards the square. As Bloodfang approached the square from the air, he could see the National Guard choppers approaching in the distance. Once he got overhead, he teleported to just outside the crowd of hostages and erected a force field around the group. Now! As he gave the order, Soulfang, Warclaw, and the two werewolves began attacking from all sides. Michael sent out a pulse of kinetic energy towards the two guards that had been waiting to open fire on the hostages. The pulse sent them flying into the crowd of gang and mafia members, while it knocked another 30 to the ground with a shockwave. Hostages cowered as panic ensued all around them. Gang and mafia members were being torn apart by high-powered guns, rune weaponry, magic from Soulfang, and the gnashing teeth of the werewolves. A group of gang members rushed towards Bloodfang and the hostages in a last-ditch effort to kill them, since they knew they were most likely not going to live through this. Bloodfang used hydrokinesis and pulled water from the pipes in the fountain, sending a tidal wave crashing into the gang members. Then he froze the molecules, imprisoning them in ice. He turned to face the hostages and saw them all cowering in fear, thinking they might be next. Well, I've had about enough of this. How about you guys? All he got in return was whimpers and pleas for their lives. He held out a hand and surrounded them in telekinetic energy as he lifted up into the air, pulling them along with him. He sat down just outside the police line and released the force field around the hostages. Once they realized they were free, they ran to safety as the police now aimed their attention at Bloodfang. The police chief came over a loudspeaker. Freeze! Get on the ground! You're under arrest! He smiled. How exactly do you think you're going to enforce that? As he lifted up off the ground, the police chief gave the order to fire, but the bullets just bounced harmlessly off of his armor. Bloodfang shook his head as he flew back towards the square, partly in amusement, but more in frustration, because he knew that this was going to be a hard-fought battle that wouldn't be won overnight. Arrogance would have to be broken on both sides, but law enforcement and government would take a little more patience, because he had no intention of waging war on innocents. Unfortunately, their politics made them incapable of seeing what they were allowing to happen right in front of them, because of their unwillingness to act. Constantly asking for the people's opinion is admirable, and decent in most cases. But when the people are like children and too naive to see their hard choices that need to be made, sometimes you must act for your people, no matter how much they dislike your choices. As Bloodfang hovered over the square, he could see Soulfang, Warclaw, and the wolves finishing off the last of the gang members that had come to fight. Lisa came over the radio to warn them that the National Guard had been informed that there were mutants in the square, and they were given the okay to come in weapons hot. Warclaw looked up to the sky and saw Bloodfang. What now? Bloodfang could see the choppers entering downtown, but he wasn't going to turn this into a bloodbath for American soldiers. So he gave the order for Soulfang, Warclaw, and the wolves to head back to base while he drew their fire. Warclaw was reluctant, but he didn't want to piss off Bloodfang, so he followed orders. While Warclaw and the rest of the group teleported through the shadows to avoid detection, Bloodfang stayed in the air and waited for their approach. He erected a force field around himself because, even though the armor could take a great deal of punishment, he wasn't going to take any chances. Once they opened fire on him, he reached out with his mind and sensed the power sources inside the choppers. He used electrokinesis and sent a pulse of electricity through the systems that shorted them out and sent the chopper spiraling to the ground. After redirecting a couple so they didn't fly into buildings and making sure they all landed relatively harmlessly, he took off at top speed. Once he was far enough away, he dove down into a shadowed area and teleported back to base to be even less detectable. Lisa was waiting for him when he got back. She had tears in her eyes and ran towards him, throwing her arms around him, when she saw he was all right. You had me worried sick! Michael held her and comforted her. It's nothing to worry about. This is what I was trained for. There are far worse things out there than the U.S. military. She looked up at him a little unsure if that should settle her nerves or make her worry more. Michael laughed a little. Did everyone make it back all right? Lisa nodded her head. Yeah, everyone else is washing up. Well, good. Then I think it's time for me to do the same. He looked back over his shoulder as he walked towards the stairs. You want to join me? Lisa gave him a sarcastic smile. Do you have to ask? They walked up the stairs and to their room for some much-needed relaxation. And that concludes Chapter 8. So if you do like what you're hearing, again, make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification bell for any time I upload a new episode. Please do check out the links below and up in the banner. And share with your friends. There will be more to come. There's a few chapters left in this, and so once we finish with the first book, Blood of the Wolf, I'm going to be uploading a video probably once a week. I just kind of wanted to do this to give you guys a taste of what's going on before, kind of staggering the episodes out a little bit. But there's more to come, so stay tuned, and see you soon.